Thank you so much, Harriet. It's great to see everybody. We appreciate you joining the Environmental Protection Network and A2's monthly forum. I'm Kathy Pope. I am EPN's Development Director and a Community Outreach Manager for our Pro Bono Technical Assistance Program. And we are very excited today to be we have two speakers who are going to be talking about renewable energy projects and how frontline communities can tap into those. I really appreciate Deborah Perry joining us. We've been talking about this for a long time, and so glad to have you here today. She is a planner and has 20 years of experience working to address environmental challenges, and particularly the risks associated with climate change. She is with ICMA. She is the program director for clean energy there, and works to support local governments across the U.S. to accelerate the deployment of clean energy. And she also currently leads the U.S. Department of Energy's Solsmart program and Solar at Scale, and is soon going to be launching a new initiative that's focused on distributing wind energy. And so she's going to be talking a little bit about funding opportunities for renewable energy projects. And then also we have Chad Laurent. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Chad, not mangling it. Okay, good. And he is the clean energy principal at Cadmus, and he specializes in renewable energy law and policy, decarbonization strategies, and renewable energy project development. He's also a nationally recognized expert in renewable energy market development strategies. So Chad's going to be providing a current case study of a solar project and the federal funding options that can be considered in some of the, the trade-offs associated with various funding opportunities.
What did you say?
If you are not muted, if you can mute yourself just during the presentation, that would be great. But so for now, I'm going to hand it over to Deborah. I don't know, Deborah, if you had any slides or anything you need to share your screen.
We do. So let me get my screen share going. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
I take that as a yes. Excellent. Let me just adjust my screen so I can see as many of you as possible. Come on. All right. So first of all, I want to thank you all for inviting us to join you today. The topic of funding renewable energy projects is a big one. So we are going to stay a little bit high level today, tell you about new opportunities, things to watch, what is happening. You might just hear kind of a general buzz that there is more money for renewable energy projects, or that these projects are becoming more economical given all of the new money. So we are going to give you an overview of the landscape of the world that we live in the day-to-day. We won't be able to go into a lot of depth. You could easily have a multi-day workshop on how to fund renewable energy projects, and each of the programs that I tell you about could probably deserve its own 1-hour webinar. But we're going to introduce a lot of different concepts. Again, at the end, Chad will kind of run through how these pieces all fit together as we think about a particular project. And I'll also maybe just caveat with a lot of this stuff is very new and hasn't necessarily been all the way through the process, and we don't have projects that have tapped all of the different funding opportunities. So case studies right now are a little challenging, and that not all of this stuff has been all the way through the process. So again, we'll share what we know, we'll share additional resources, things you can access, and then absolutely happy to answer questions, talk through concerns that you have, things like that. So we'll be pretty brief on the slides and leave plenty of time for Q&A. Feel free to use the chat. I probably won't look at it while I'm talking, but I'll catch up when I hand things over to Chad. So I am from the International City County Management Association, or ICMA. ICMA is the professional association that supports the folks who run cities and counties around the globe. Most of our members are located here in the United States, but we support our members to basically execute on good governance and running the cities and counties around the world and here in the United States. In addition to our support for members in general, and again, being a professional association, we run a lot of technical assistance programs for specific areas and concerns to local government. I put a few of those here on this slide, but there are many more. The two programs I work on specifically are Solsmart, which is a program that helps local governments implement solar-friendly practices and get more solar projects going in their communities, as well as Solar at Scale, which is really focused on those larger scale projects, which brings a whole unique set of challenges. But we also have other projects like the City Health Dashboard, where we help local governments connect with meaningful public health indicators. We have an entire brownfields program and other things that we do, again, on issues that our members and local governments are interested in and are working on. Today, we're here largely because we are part of the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. And I'm guessing this group is familiar with that, so I won't go in a lot of depth, but the EJ TIC-TACs, love a good acronym, funded by the EPA, is a network of organizations, of which we are one, helping to support environmental justice work on the ground and basically help connecting people with resources. So I'll be talking specifically about how to connect with renewable energy funding resources. Again, I'm assuming you're all fairly familiar with this, but the TIC-TACs, we have national coverage. Different organizations are running these technical assistance centers around the country. So you can see based on the region that you're located in, and I'll certainly share these slides out later, if you don't already have this information, who's leading in each of those regions. And just to point out, ICMA is a national technical assistance center. So there's 3 national centers, of which we run one, and so are helping to support this work around the country. To connect with us and then the program in general, there's an email, there's a phone number, there's a website, and again, we'll share this again at the end of the presentation, and make sure that everybody knows how to connect with the TIC-TACs. So to pivot to today's agenda, again, there is a lot going on in the world of renewable energy funding. A lot of exciting things happening, new programs coming out all the time, a lot of changes, a lot of guidance coming out from organizations like the IRS. So there's a very dynamic environment right now. I'm going to focus mostly on solar. That is something that's pretty widely applicable. Solar projects can basically be done in any community across the country. Much of what I say is applicable to other technologies, but to try to make this a little bit more manageable, Chad and I will mostly focus on solar, but we can bring in some other examples and tell you when things are applicable to other technologies. But to set the stage, I did want to go through some of the trends that we're seeing, help everybody understand what is going on with solar development. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different roles and opportunities for community organizations. I understand a lot of you on this call are associated with smaller community-based organizations. We're certainly going to be tailoring our remarks to roles that you all can play in your communities and on projects. I'll then talk about some of the funding opportunities and what's happening. Again, I'll stay high level, but introduce you to some of the things that we think are the most exciting new changes, review some resources and support, and again, I'll turn it over to Chad, who will walk through a little how we put these different pieces together and really think about how this works in the context of a project. So the benefits of solar energy, and again, clean energy in general, are many, and I won't go through kind of convincing you that there are benefits to clean energy. I hope that we're all kind of on the same page there. But these projects, ultimately help to support our climate and our sustainability goals. They help to create opportunities for local power generation that is clean, that is reliable, and that is, again, locally generated. And when we create those generation opportunities, we're creating opportunities for local jobs and local economic development. And ultimately, what probably brings most people to the table is that through these projects, we can stabilize our energy costs, our utility bills, in some cases we can save money, but in most cases we can at least stabilize those costs and reduce our exposure to kind of volatile energy pricing, which has been challenging, especially in recent years. So lots of benefits. Every organization, every project should really think about the benefits that it most values and is most looking for, and that can then kind of guide the decision making about different aspects of the project, how it's designed, where it's located, if you're looking to maximize job opportunities or maximize energy resilience. These things can kind of guide the decisions about the projects that you pursue, which may also relate to the funding that you pursue. So the trends, the yellow line here in this graph is the declining price of solar. The price has come down dramatically in the last decade or more. Yes, thank you. So as the price has declined, the amount of solar we see, and that is being installed is also gone up. So the blue graph showing you the increase that we've seen. And then over on the right-hand side, this goes out even further. So this is projecting the growth of solar out to 2030. So we expect this trend to continue and to even accelerate, particularly with the new funding opportunities. And the other thing you see on the right side is the broken out by the different types of solar. So there's the residential, which is the darkest blue, the non-residential, so solar on businesses and non-residential buildings in that light blue or middle blue, and then utility scale solar in the lightest color. And that again is these large scale projects connected to the utility, so essentially solar power plants on the grid. And we are expecting a lot of growth in that sector. Now, another trend that we track is who is able to access solar and take advantage of all those benefits that I mentioned. There's a great report that comes out each year by the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on who is adopting solar and looking at their different demographics, things like income and education. And so you can see, compared to the general population, who is frequently adopting solar. So more likely to speak English, more likely to have higher home values, higher income levels, and more educated. And these are things that, again, we are tracking because the goal here is to have solar be inclusive and accessible to everyone. And we'd really like to bend the curve on these trends and find ways to engage every sector of the population and to reach those demographics that traditionally have not been kind of adopting as much. And that there's a whole range of issues that we get into when we work on that. So that's things like credit scores and language barriers and housing ownership. So again, tracking these things to understand who is able to adopt solar and then how we can reach everybody as we think about our strategies and our financing opportunities, et cetera. I recognize this group is national, so just wanted to state clearly what state you're in matters. When you think about solar funding opportunities, when you think about the economics of your project, it can be anything from who is allowed to own solar to the rates that you get, the fees that you pay. So each state, really state policy can have a big impact here. So we'll talk kind of, again, nationally and share the funding opportunities that there are nationally. But as if you were to pursue a project or think about a strategy, you definitely need to get into the weeds of what is allowed in your state and again, those rates and other things. So there's a lot of state-specific things that you'll have to get to know if you were to pursue a project. So what is the role of a community-based organization in clean energy development? What can be the role? It's a long list. I'm sure there's others that you all can think of, but these are some of the ones that came to mind for me. So community organizations certainly can be an owner of renewable energy systems. They can also be a host where you don't actually own it, but your property or your building can be hosting a system that you don't own through a lease agreement or otherwise. You can be an educator, an advocate, a convener, bringing together different groups that need to meet to overcome some of those barriers that I mentioned. You can be a partner, partnering either with your local government or another organization. Maybe they own property and you don't. So there are a lot of examples of great partnerships with community-based organizations to make projects come to fruition. You can be a funder, depending on how your organization is structured, either a funder yourself or a way, through things like social, what I want to say, crowdsource funding, things like that. There are various roles to play in funding. And ideally, and hopefully, you will all be beneficiaries in some way. But absolutely, thinking about, you all are, your organization probably buys energy. You're situated in your community. So how can you be a beneficiary of these projects? So again, I think as you embark, if there is a renewable energy journey for you, thinking about the role that you play, what's appropriate for you, I think can be really helpful. And again, think about what are the funding opportunities that flow from that. So the topic at hand is, funding for renewable energy, and it's an exciting time to be talking about that. It truly is more affordable than ever to go solar, to implement any clean energy solution, in large part due to the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. So there was a lot of new, primarily tax credits, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. Tax credits for both residents and businesses to adopt clean energy resources and upgrades to homes and buildings. There's a host of special bonus credits that we'll talk about that specifically target what we call energy communities and disadvantaged communities, that create opportunities for brownfields to get these bonuses. There are opportunities for local governments and tax-exempt organizations to get direct payment instead of tax credits, and we'll talk again a little bit about that. And then a whole variety of grants and new programs that receive funding through these laws. Almost too many to track, where, depending on whether you're working on a brownfield or community solar project or, in a certain community, the whole array of new grants and funding opportunities. And on that last line, specifically the Solar for All program, which is really exciting. And I'll touch on that in a minute. Another way to think about this is, the IRA funding in whole is something like $391 billion. These are really big investments broken out over a whole range of different topics. So again, it's there's so much more than we could cover in an hour. But just to know that investment is coming kind of from all angles and through many different levels of government. And there are many of us who are trying to track all of that and to help and to understand, where these opportunities lie. So I'm going to share some highlights, some things that I think we're especially excited about and we think are really big opportunities that we want to make sure everyone is aware of and thinking about where they could fit in. Solar for All. Solar for All is an EPA-led program. They made announcements earlier this spring about $7 billion in grant funding that will go out to 60 organizations. Most of these are state grants. So there's pretty much one grant per state. And then there's a few others, 6 awards made specifically to tribes. And then there were 5 multi-state awards, so organizations that are going to work beyond just a single state. But the link here at the bottom of the page is where you can go to find out where that money is going in your state. And that is a great place to start. Solar for All is really focused on advancing solar in low-income and disadvantaged communities. Each program is unique. So again, really important to understand what your state is doing. Those announcements were made. The programs themselves will take about a year, I think, to actually stand up and to actually start getting money out. So that's a period of time when you can look up what your state is doing, ideally connect with that organization and understand what projects are going to be funded, how they're going to roll out that money. In some cases, states have focused on a specific sector like affordable housing or multifamily housing or a certain demographic. In other cases, they're working on community solar projects. So it really looks different in every state. And it's just basically need to kind of do our homework, understand what each state is going to be investing in, and what their timeline is for getting those funds out. These are very big dollars. These are going to be really, for most states, I think a real game changer, and they're going to be looking for projects to invest in and to, again, it'll roll out differently in each state, but I think a really important one to keep our eye on. The federal clean energy tax credits. So there are two credits that we tend to worry or focus on: the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. For the most part, it's an either or situation, and each in projects are kind of deciding which one makes sense for them. The investment tax credit is 30% of the eligible cost of the solar project, kind of the upfront cost. It helps take a bite out of that upfront cost. Versus the production tax credit, which if people choose that route, they get paid based on what they actually produce. But these are two big federal tax credits that support renewable energy systems. The IRA extended their life, so we now know these will be in place for I think till 2032. So there's some stability there, and they now kind of plan projects knowing that these will be in place. And then another exciting piece of this is that the IRA put in bonus credits. So in addition to that, for example, the 30% of the ITC, you can get bonus credits on top of that if your project meets certain requirements. So the two that I think are probably most of interest to this group are energy communities and low-income communities. So for example, with the ITC, these would be a 10% bonus for energy communities, and between 10 and 20% bonus for the low-income communities. The IRS has put out a whole host of guidance about what constitutes an energy community and a low-income community. But I'm going to link you in a few minutes to a map where you can help figure out whether you meet these requirements, and whether the projects that you might be thinking of could be eligible for these bonuses, which are significant. So this mapping tool, it's currently in beta phase. So again, a lot of this stuff is new, kind of hot off the presses. People are rolling out tools. But the World Resources Institute has created this bonus mapper tool. I think it's great. It's really easy to use. You essentially can input your address or the address of a potential project, and it will tell you what bonuses you might be eligible for. Again, it's in the beta phase, so they have a few more improvements to make before they call it final. And the federal government continues to kind of roll out nuanced mapping layers and things like that. So it's dynamic, but I think it's going to be really helpful. Again, if you have a project in mind, if you have a property in mind, as a way to fairly quickly see what bonuses it might be eligible for, and to get a sense of whether it fits in one of these categories. And then some of you might be saying, why is she talking to us about tax credits if we're nonprofit organizations? And I typically work with local governments who do not pay taxes. The reason is because the other thing that happened within the IRA is this new approach called elective pay, where nonprofit organizations or organizations that do not pay taxes can still get the tax credit as a direct payment if you choose to own the system. Again, there's a whole host of guidance and how do you actually do this. And for those of you who aren't used to paying taxes, here's your organization. I will say there's some nuances to this, and we have been talking to local governments to figure that out as well. But For many organizations, I think this could be a really great opportunity to, make their project financially viable, to be able to get the value of that tax credit, even if they don't pay taxes, and to ultimately, make their project affordable. So again, I did a whole 1-hour webinar on just elective pay. There's a lot there. We can certainly share that material, how you actually do this, but yeah, very interesting and exciting development in renewable energy funding. And this is an example where there's not really anybody who's gone all the way through the process yet. Folks have filed and are working to get this. But I think after we have some actual success stories, we're really excited to be able to share case studies and show how to get all the way through the process. So I'm going to switch gears for a minute. Those are like big federal tax incentives and things that are happening. But for your organizations, I think another really exciting opportunity to be able to get in the game of renewable energy and explore this field and look for potential projects could be the Grant Makers program, the Thriving Communities Grant Makers program. So these are smaller grants really targeted toward small nonprofit organizations. And I'll skip to, a whole bunch of different topic areas that are going to be eligible for these grants, including things like green infrastructure, which I believe will include energy infrastructure. And these grants are enabling organizations to do a whole range of, building their capacity and getting involved in these projects and advancing these projects to advance environmental justice goals at the end of the day. So yeah, we're putting this kind of on the list of things to watch for smaller organizations, which might help to fund kind of getting involved and advancing projects at the very local level. This slide, I wanted to put a few things on your radar as things to watch. So if this is an area that's of interest to you, if you're thinking about trying to fund renewable energy projects, there's a lot of programs that are currently standing up and rolling out. And so I wanted to share some of the things that we think are worth watching. There's a few different clean energy investment funds. So this EPA National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Fund. Again, things to watch and see how these are going to create opportunities for financing and may, if we do this presentation, I don't know, in a few months or so, we might have more we could say there. FEMA. So again, all of this money is coming out through many different federal agencies. I mostly watch the Department of Energy, but increasingly we see money coming through EPA and through FEMA and through HUD. So, funding for these projects is coming through a whole variety of streams, including FEMA. So this building resilient infrastructure and communities, most of that funding ultimately will go to states, local governments, tribes, and territories. So getting back to that kind of what is your role? For this fund, you probably won't be the recipient, but can you be at the table? Can you be an advocate pushing for where you need resilient infrastructure, where this money should be going? So that's why I kind of put it on the things to watch list to understand where this money might be going in your community and who's making those decisions. The climate pollution reduction grants. So again, the recipients are likely states, municipalities, and tribes. But again, put it on the watch list because I think it can be really helpful for your organization to think about where are these funds going, who's receiving them, and how can we make sure they're going into our communities and advancing our project goals. EECBG, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. Similarly, these funds are likely to go, or well, they will go to a lot of local governments, and many local governments are preparing their applications right now. So if you're talking to your local government partners, if you have a partnership there, asking them, have you applied for your EECBG money and what are we planning to do with it in our community? This is a very flexible pot of money that local governments can use to advance usually smaller projects, but has a lot of flexibility, so it can be really great. And then the last one I put on the list is USDA. So again, money is coming from every angle. So USDA, for those of you who are in a rural setting, The REAP program, Rural Energy for America program, has some really great opportunities through both grants and loans that can support renewable energy in rural settings. I wanted to put that on the radar as well. For those of you who feel like your key role is helping residents connect with all of this IRA money and how they might ultimately use it for their own home or their own business, I wanted to point to this calculator, and some of you might have seen it before. I think it's been fairly widely circulated, but it's really valuable or really useful. So Rewiring America created an incentive calculator. You can literally put in your information. The page is there. Where you live, who's your utility, how do you file your taxes, and what kind of income level you have. And it tells you all the incentives that you could potentially be eligible for. And that can be everything from money for solar panels, money to upgrade your electrical system, put in a new panel if that's what you need to pursue electrification, electric vehicle charging. It really spits out something that's very customized and really easy to understand. So again, if your role is about trying to connect residents with what money they could get for their own home, I would recommend just helping people connect with this calculator. It's really informative. So I won't go through every one of these, but there are numerous resources. I would actually say filtering the resources is almost the hardest part because there's so many. But a few that I find particularly helpful, the TIC-TAC program, again, the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, has a grants database. Those are searchable grants. You put in what kind of work you're trying to do and who you are, and it spits out what those opportunities are. There's something very similar by the America Cities Climate Challenge called the Afford tool. I think it's a little bit different, so I would recommend looking at both if you're interested in looking for grant opportunities. This one also has some other like incentives and some other things that I think aren't, well, I think they each have different things, and so looking at both is worthwhile. This report, the Roadmap for Maximizing Inflation Reduction Act Opportunities and Community Benefits, is a really great report for those of you who really want to understand what is in the IRA and how do I make sure it gets into my community. It'll take you a little while to get through it, but it really is comprehensive and really helpful. I wanted to point to the National Renewable Energy Lab has a new data set that they're calling STEADY. They're really great at naming programs and coming up with cute acronyms. I think this is, it's not unlike the WRI tool where you can see the bonus mapping kind of layers, but they have some other additional layers about, for example, your solar market and whether what the value of solar is in your community is, and some other layers that are really interesting. This one is also kind of under development. They don't yet have the online mapping tool. So I will, I'll communicate as we hear that it gets a little bit more user friendly. Right now it's data layers and it's a little wonky, but they're really great data layers. So through the TIC-TAC program, we're happy to help people pull those or wade through those. I hope that they can move to a nice, easy to use online tool, but for right now, again, if anybody needs help, I'll put up the kind of TIC-TAC contact info, and we can always help people figure out how to get these layers. And then the last thing, before I turn it over to Chad, is I want to mention our Solsmart program. So Solsmart is funded by the Department of Energy. We've run this program for more than 9 years, and it is a program where we help local governments adopt policies and programs to support solar. At the end of the day, they are designated. So if those of you who maybe are familiar with like Tree City USA, something like that, Solsmart is similar. You earn a plaque on the wall for the actions that you take, again, for local governments. But local governments that participate receive no cost technical assistance. And that can mean anything from looking at the feasibility of solar on brownfields or underutilized land. It can be about crafting policies to meet the needs of low-income residents. Communities that participate in Solsmart are eligible to work with us and get assistance for free to advance those solar strategies. Chad and his team at Cadmus have been on our Solsmart team again for the 9 years that we've been doing this work, and we have a whole host of other experts that we connect with to do this work and to provide that technical assistance. So if you have a partnership with your local government, if you think they might be interested, this is a way to take advantage and make sure that you're kind of getting that additional technical assistance specifically on solar, and we can help advance solar projects. So we have a website. Again, happy to answer questions or meet with people who might be interested in that. But I'm going to turn it over now to Chad. Like I said, he's one of our technical assistance providers for Solsmart and often coaches communities through the process of putting in actual solar systems and all of the decisions that that need to be made, including funding. So I will turn it over to you, Chad.
Thanks, Deb. As Deb mentioned, we are often brought in to work with nonprofit organizations, cities, and state agencies who are interested in meeting climate change emission reduction policies, whether that's net zero by 2050 or 80 by 50 or net zero by 2030. And a key component of those plans are how do we get our electricity from renewable energy sources? And so if we have property or own buildings or parking lots, how do we put solar or other renewable technologies as appropriate? Solar is the most common because, as Deb mentioned earlier, it can be deployed almost anywhere. And there's a lot of existing roof space and existing parking lots and other developed land that can incorporate solar. And there's opportunities there then to reduce your emissions from your electricity. And so there's a number of different ways of procuring renewables. You can buy renewable energy certificates. You can own and operate the system. You can be part of a community choice aggregation program through a local utility. You can participate in utility green power programs. In those states that were on one of the maps, there's like 16 plus states where you can enter into a power purchase agreement with a third party. There's other innovative power purchase agreement arrangements that you can make. And then finally, not in any order here, community solar is another example of a type of way that folks can get to zero emission electricity for their operations. And so again, we're working with NGOs and local governments that are typically, they are not tax-paying entities. Next slide. And so under the old tax credit system, if you didn't pay taxes, you were not eligible for the 30% tax credit. So you were basically paying 30% more for a solar PV system on your property than someone who was a tax-paying entity. And so many nonprofits and cities in those states where you could do third-party ownership, they elected to go with a developer who would be able to take the tax credit and then share some of those savings with the nonprofit or with the city or local government, or looking to find a tax equity investor in the project who would own and operate the project, take advantage of the tax credit, and then try and pass those savings along to the entity that didn't pay taxes. But again, with this direct pay option, now nonprofits and cities and other state agencies who didn't pay taxes can get that 30% tax credit themselves, plus different operators. So that own and operate is a more financially attractive option. And also in the remaining states that can't do a PPA or third-party ownership, it allows municipalities and nonprofits, churches and otherwise, to be able to purchase the system and get the same sort of tax reduction in cost through the direct pay. However, you still need to come up with the upfront cost of the system. So if you want to own and operate the system, there's things that you do have to keep in mind in terms of you do have to come up with the money in order to pay for the system. Next slide. So you want to form a team to figure out what the goal is of installing solar on your church or on a building or on a school within a community. So what is the ownership model that's available? You need to put out a request for proposals, negotiate a contract with the solar developer, determine what the goals are. Is it to maximize savings, or are there other goals of the project in terms of creating local workforce or selecting a developer who is local versus national? making sure that you're engaging with stakeholders so they know like where this system is going to go, making sure that it's not a surprise. And then you need to have internally your sustainability staff, your energy manager or facility manager, whoever pays your electric bills, your finance and legal departments. If there's some sort of procurement office, you have to definitely coordinate with all of those individuals, especially in terms of taking advantage of direct pay. You have to file forms with the IRS that may be unfamiliar if you're a city or a town or a nonprofit that isn't usually filing a tax return. Next slide. So some examples, we've been working with a state agency that is typically not owned and operated systems, but now are evaluating the financials of owning and operating systems, solar PV systems, and looking at the fact that they can take that 30% tax credit means that those systems are going to pay for themselves a lot sooner than they have otherwise. Similarly, working with a city that is looking to install a geothermal system, heating system in a new school building that they're developing, and they're able to take advantage of the 30% tax credit for that geothermal system, so that again takes a 30% discount off of that. And again, I think as Deb alluded to, there's different upgrades to the building that are required in order to accommodate a renewable energy system, can be, depending on what they are, can be included in the overall cost of the system, that then you get the 30% off of that total installed cost of the system that you're installing. And again, you can add up different incentives here. So if you are installing a 100 kilowatt system, which would be a fairly large rooftop system, you would get the 30% tax credit. If you made sure that the content was domestically manufactured, now you get a 40% of that cost in cash back. If it's sited in an energy community as defined by the IRS, you get another 10%. So now you're at a 50% discount off the cost of that 100 kW system. And again, so you can get up to 60-ish% of the system cost as a cash payment back, in the tax year that you file for the cost of a system. Which again, so a system that was going to cost $100,000, you might only have to pay $40,000 or $50,000 to install that system, which make the economics and the payback of that just look much better. Again, you do have to come up with that upfront cost of that $100,000 system, because you don't get the money back from it until you file. So on the next slide, just showing that it does take time here, that if you had started this process in 2023, you would have completed the pre-filing registration. The system was going to come online in, say, this year. You would need to pre-file that you're going to submit taxes for 2024. Because that's the year that you're going to say that this system was installed and when you're going to file for taxes. And then the IRS takes 4 months to process and give you a registration number. So you probably you would have had to have done that in early 2024 to get time to be able to get the tax number before the end of the calendar year. And then you would be filing then next year for 2024's tax year. But that would all assume that the project was sort of lined up and going to be installed in 2024. So looking ahead, there's probably a couple of year runway here before you would be able to realize the tax credit from the time the system was installed, and then you file the taxes, and then you get the direct pay check from the IRS. And so you definitely have to coordinate with your finance department or work with a tax attorney to be able to make sure that you're filing the appropriate forms at the right time so that you don't get delayed in getting that tax credit. Again, it doesn't take away the idea that you have to finance for these projects and come up with that upfront capital, but it does make the economics look a lot better once you get that check back from the IRS. So that's just a quick example of what that process could look like and some of the things to keep in mind. And so I will pause there to make sure that we have at least 10 minutes or so for questions.
Thank you both so much. I know there have been some comments and questions in the chat that I think have been answered, but if if anyone has questions that they'd like to raise their hand and come off mute to ask, please do.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Yes, this is Stacy Shepardson, and I do have a quick question. We are working on a project in New Orleans, utilizing some of this, I guess, some of the same processes. It also takes in even though when people think of New Orleans, they automatically think straight urban, but there's um, an unincorporated area right outside of New Orleans that we were looking to do solar and hydro. Does that affect the ability to participate since we're looking to incorporate hydro into this plant, or does it have to be 100% solar?
No, there's a number of eligible technologies, including hydro under some circumstances. So yeah, it isn't just just solar. There's a whole list of renewable energy technologies that are eligible for the tax credit.
And is it possible for me to get your contact information to follow up? We have been working with the city, the developer, for about a year now on this process. But I would love to see, if we can pick your brain or get you all's technical assistance within this process as we are moving forward. Because everything you said was like, are you listening? Are you watching our meetings or something? So you really hit and we want to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to and Deb put her contact in as well. I'll do the same.
I did. So my email's in the chat. I'm happy to hear a follow-up from anyone. And Stacey, I'll also say we just recently heard, I believe New Orleans is signing up for Solsmart. So I'm happy to connect with them through that program as well, which opens up some other technical assistance opportunities.
Well, great. Yeah, we definitely.
All right, thanks, Stacey. Gabriella, did you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. I live on Staten Island, in a very small island in New York City. We're currently facing the destruction of 325 acres of wetland right on the shoreline. We have experienced in 2012, we experienced a 15-foot storm surge and other storms after that, which kills 24 plus people, and the plus is very large. Where one of the wetlands that's going to be destroyed is because they're putting a wind energy project. The turbines are in the water, so that's not a problem. But the platform, the staging area, is going to destroy 35 acres of wetland. Yeah, more like 35 acres of wetland. And it's right near the area that the 24 plus people were killed. What can we do about this? And the mitigation that's required of this is going to be not even on our island, very far away. So is there anything that we can do about it? The owner and the developer is a recipient of $425 million grant.
I have to say it's out of my area of expertise. It likely, I mean, I don't have a great answer.
Well, let me make it a little general then. What if the clean energy, the renewable energy project is harming the community?
Yeah, so I mean, depending on how the project is funded, I would assume that requirements like NEPA and others are part of that. And typically those processes have opportunities for public engagement. I'm not saying any of that is completely satisfying, but those are usually the processes to intervene in and then ultimately like pursue legal action. Any large offshore wind project, particularly again, if federal funding's in play, and Chad, maybe you have more information on that, but would be going through some federal processes that are usually opportunities for public engagement, or they're supposed to be.
Yeah, they don't do that very well.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a whole host of federal, state, and local permitting and approval processes that would be needed, it sounds like, for a project of that magnitude, and there would be opportunities to intervene in any of those processes. And that would be the method to voice concerns about the project and where wetland mitigation was decided to be located. I don't know anything about this project, but if it's a large offshore wind project, there would have been multiple levels of different approvals of different agencies. So you would have to go through those processes.
If I could continue, there was a hearing concerning the off the island mitigation. Lots of people were against it, including some of our local politicians, but they're going ahead and doing it anyway. That's what I meant by that. They don't do it very well.
Yeah. No,
All right. Thank you.
Winnie, did you want to jump in?
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Winifred Victor Hines, and I am with the Weequahic Park Association in Newark, New Jersey. And we help manage the park with a partnership agreement with the county. And it's a 311-acre park with an 80-acre lake. And we do have some idea of how we would like to incorporate solar or maybe hydro in the future, but we do need technical assistance and also, I guess, to broaden our vision. And so would you happen to have any case studies that we can refer to or any partnerships that you've done with any parks that we can take a look at? Thank you.
Chad, do you all have any parks that you've worked on recently?
Yeah, we've worked with a couple state agencies in Massachusetts that operate park systems, and so they have looked at deploying solar on different park facilities, like different buildings that house infrastructure and services within the park system, and being able to put solar on those. So as they included solar as they were hiring contractors to do some renovation work. And as part of that bid, they included in it, and we also want to hire a solar developer to put solar on some facilities that are within the park. Yeah, absolutely. Depending on who has ownership of the park and would be in charge of paying the electric bills, and you would have to think through like who's the entity in charge of the park that would then like be in charge of filing the tax credit and owning or operating or deciding who owns and operates the system. There's a number of examples of it's mostly been cities or states that own and operate and manage parks that they're looking to do that. But we've also worked with some land-based nonprofit organizations that own like Audubon sanctuaries or land trusts, and so they have also helped them think about how they put solar, within those properties that they manage, which it's kind of like a park because there's public or member access to those facilities.
So would I be able to find all of that on your website?
You probably won't find written case studies that are specifically parks, but I can definitely help pull together some examples. The one that comes to mind for me, and I'll need to follow up on its current status, was in Baltimore. And I think they were looking at solar at a park to support a resilience hub, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, I can do a little legwork and make sure that the projects that I know of are implemented and are moving forward. We don't have anything already written up, but I think I can pull some things together. And then the other thing I wanted to say, for those of you who might be planning something, but you're not ready or you don't have the funding right now, solar ready is another thing to think about. So whether it's a building or the layout of the park, asking your designers, if you're engaged with a landscape design or architect, things like that, to make sure it's solar ready, to make sure if you need to put in infrastructure, if you need to think about where roads are going to be or access points or how that's going to relate to some other features of the park. I think thinking about the design, even if you don't have the upfront money now so that you don't have to undo something later. It does make the project more affordable later, particularly if we think about buildings, if we put conduit in, if we anticipate where the solar will be so we don't put an air conditioning unit on the roof, things like that. It really can make it more affordable to do solar later when you are ready. And as I said, the extension of these tax credits is out into 2030s. So they'll be there if you aren't ready for the project now, but you're going to do it in a few years. So I would encourage you to think about solar ready design if that's appropriate. Winnie, I will put my email in the chat if you want to connect with me. I'm happy to try to find some examples and get them over to you.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm trying to catch up on the chat. I know we only have a couple more minutes left. I think we've answered most things, but I'll look again. I don't know, Kathy, if there's anything you want us to say as we wrap up.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you both so much for all the incredible information. I don't know if I asked you this before, but would you be able to share your slides so that we could also share those? Yeah, all that great information. We'd love to pass on. Thank you so much. Yeah, we have just a minute left. I don't know if there's a last question or if Harriet, if there are any announcements or anything you wanted to say. I just wanted to say thank you to Harriet and A2, all the members being such great partners to EPN and for spearheading these forums that I think are so incredibly helpful and provide such great information. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your energy and commitment and enthusiasm. And I guess I found the world of solar a little hard to understand. And I guess what, more than anything I've taken away from this is that there are the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers set up specifically to help communities and people like our members through that process. So let's make sure that we're maximizing that opportunity. And should we be specifically going to your TICTAC? Do you have expertise in the area more than anyone else?
Kathy, do you want to chime in on that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I guess do all TICTACs have equal amount of expertise in solar and renewables? Or should we be going to the wonderful Deborah and benefiting from her and probably a team of expertise?
It's a great question. I don't know all, I mean, we do know a lot of them. And so many TICTACs are running differently and have different types of expertise. I think that your team is probably the most involved in solar that I have seen. And so we don't want to overwhelm you, but you would be who I would suggest people connect with for questions about solar for sure.
And I know that kind of intake information that I shared, if we see that opportunity to make a referral to a certain region, or there's a lot of that happening behind the scenes. So we may say, oh, your question isn't exactly in our lane, and refer you to the right organization. So I know there's a lot of that happening. But yeah, certainly if it's directly about anything we talked about today, and specifically on how to advance solar projects, we're happy to field that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.